Today on Artifactually Speaking, I talk about a Beveled Rim Bowl, BRB. I'm Dr. Brad Hafford, archaeologist at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm here in the Penn Museum's Near East Study Room, looking at artifacts today to talk a little bit about measurement, because that's what I really love to study and what it means for society, economy, and the development of cities in particular. So what is a beveled rim bowl? Well, it's a very basic kind of pottery. It's a very crude ware, so you can see that it's been made with a clay that has a lot of straw temper, and that temper has burned away in the firing to leave a lot of voids. So it's very quickly made. In fact, it's probably pushed down into a mold that was dug into the ground, really. So you make a flat piece of this clay, lay it over that, and you punch it down in. Well, push with your fist, because we can see the lines of the knuckles of the person who made it more than 5,000 years ago. So this kind of bowl is extremely common in the Uruk period, somewhere around 3500 BCE. And we wonder why. I mean, there can be tens of thousands of these bowls at an Uruk site. Not all Uruk sites, but many of them. And these are spread well away from the city of Uruk, which was in the south of Mesopotamia. So we want to know what they are. Why do they use it? I mean, after you've pushed it down into the mold, there's a bit of slop clay around it. So what you do is you cut that away with your finger, and that leaves this distinctive bevel. That's why we call it Beveled Rim Bowl, and we use the abbreviation BRB. Some people say that it's just an offering bowl, that maybe you took your votive materials to the temple in this, or for taxation perhaps. Some say, no, in fact, because it has all those voids in the clay, it doesn't hold liquid very well. It kind of leaks, really. If you put water in one of these, it'll just seep out. So some people have said maybe it's for making cheese, separating the whey from the curd. Others say yogurt, maybe. But it seems like that's just too common for that. So we think it's for a dry commodity, and grain makes a lot of sense. Some have said that maybe you would bake bread in this. In Egypt, there's a similar bowl that we know was used for baking bread. Now, one theory was proposed, though, that it's actually a ration bowl. And I love this idea. I don't know that it really works, though. People were paid in grain, even in this early period. The Late Uruk is really before writing, just as writing is coming in at that very Late Uruk and into the early dynastic. So writing starts around 3200 BCE. And these things date earlier than that, in that proto-urban period, a vital period for the development of cities and for kingship and state, things like this. So we believe we do have already wage labor. People are working for rations. The earliest texts we have are economic, and many of them are these kinds of ration lists or commodities being doled out. So what if these were ration bowls and every worker had to have one, and that was your ration or part of your ration for the day?
Sir, I want some more.
In the earliest texts we've got, well, or that we can really understand, we hear that a ration for an adult male was only 60 sila per month. That's 2 sila per day, and approximately. And this has been proposed as a sila bowl containing 1 sila, 1 unit. The problem is that we don't really know what that unit's equivalent is. We hear about it in the texts a lot, even through this early dynastic, and especially in the Ur III period. We hear about sila bowls, and we hear about the rest of the system. So we know the divisions. And sila is also called ku or ka. And that's because we've got Sumerian and Akkadian writings. The ban is also called the sutu. That's 10 sila. Certainly in the south, we've got that. And then 6 of those ban or sutu make up a bariga. Bariga is literally the measuring vessel, but we need to know how many liters or what percentage of a liter is a sila. Our best estimates is that it's somewhere between 0.8 and 1 liter. So these should hold about a liter if they're going to be that ration, perhaps. There have been studies on these things, and they don't really seem to hit regular sizes. So maybe that ration doesn't work, but I still want to test it. I'm going to see what this thing will hold today. But I also want to talk about measures in general. They start out with reference that we all know, so that if I could tell you to go compare to something that you have and that I have, we've got some kind of reference point. The basic unit of length that we might all have heard of in the ancient world is the cubit, or we call it a cubit, from the elbow to the fingertips. And this is about 1/2 meter. On mine, I think it measures about 46 centimeters. But that's the thing. You could tolerate a certain amount of variance. But I could tell you, go measure your arm, and that's about what I want in the size of a reed or something like that. Get a bundle of reeds all about one. It was cush in the Mesopotamian terminology. That is the arm length, or the arm length here. Well, these terms that they come up with get redefined through time to try to make them more standard. If I'm building something that is really important to be precise, then I need a very good standard. But when I'm just doing daily activities, an approximate is perfectly fine. So I think that maybe rations could be starting with a double handful. And so what I want to do, first of all, is just see what my double handful is, and we'll talk about what that could mean. So I'm going to use barley, and I'm just going to try to grab in there and say that's my double handful. I'll put it down here and then kind of measure that. And I'm going to do this a few times just to get statistically what that might be before I compare here. So, BRB. So I am consistently coming up with about 400 milliliters. So my idea that maybe that was the ku or the sila, probably not, but maybe 2 of them, because 0.8 liters we think might be. And we've done that by, there are very few pots that are actually written with their amount that they should contain, but we do have a few. They're across a broad period of time and space within Mesopotamia. Still, when we got the best one and were able to measure it, we came up with 0.81 as the sila. We divided by the number that it said it should contain after filling it with rice, I believe they used. So 0.81, that would be twice of what my double handful was coming up. But we can already see a problem there. How much can you hold? Does it heap up? I was trying to get as much as I could, but of course you can only hold so much and it overflows. So now, let's see what this can hold. And I am using barley that has not been treated a great deal. In other words, it hasn't been hulled or pearled, which is the modern way to prepare it for food, but that takes away a lot of the mass and the size. So let's just see how much we can fit in there. And where do I stop? I'm going to keep going until it just overflows, and it can't really hold anymore, like about there. And then I'm going to have to sweep away all of this excess. And then I'm going to have to measure that, which can be difficult because I have to make sure that I'm there. We're adding a little bit of error every time, but in a way this is better than just trying to measure and calculate with mathematics, because these things aren't all that regular. They make an irregular cone when they're inside that. So I'll check this out and show you when I'm back. Well, it filled my measuring cup, which is just barely over 750 milliliters. So in this case, it kind of looks good that the around 0.8 liter is what this would contain. That's about twice what my real handful is. Although it looks like I could hold that much, I can't. This thing bevels out more. It gives this upper portion that can sort of dome up a bit more than what I can hold. But it's about twice, which is kind of interesting. I wonder if originally, if you had a granary, someone could see how much they could take 2 scoops out. We don't really know. No one tells us how they were paid in grain, just that they were in most cases. So, ration bowl, well, the problem is you need to be statistically valid, which means you need hundreds of these. And someone did test more than 200 of these back in the 1970s and found possible distributions of 3 different sizes. But then, in the 90s, I think, someone went back and looked at them again and said, well, no, it doesn't really make these modal values. Instead, it's pretty constant that it runs 20% up or down from somewhere around that 0.8, 0.9 liters. So, are these mass-produced by the state and given to workers, or are they individually made at a house? Does everyone just make them? At this time period, they're starting to introduce the potter's wheel. And this, though, is very crude and very just handmade. And you can see the difference between the inside and the outside. That outside mold really looks like it was pushed into the ground. So if you had a bit of wet dirt, you could push an old BRB in there to make a mold, then get that new piece of flattened clay and push it in and get a new bowl. You could even make them all around and then just build a fire over the top of it and bake them. And it would probably bake them. They're not high temperature fire. And they're very crude bowls, but they were so common that they must have been used for something. In fact, I think they were used for many things. Some people say, of course, the cooking or processing. Some have even said maybe salt in order to help it dry out. We just don't know, but it could have been used for any and all. Could be a kind of ration bowl, a scoop. But if there is a measurement to be made by the supervisor to give to the workers, there's probably a more specific tool, some kind of ladle or something, that they would then pour into the individual bowls. And so the standardization of this is not so important. The standardization of the measuring tool, that really is important. Well, I hope you've enjoyed looking at this BRB with me, and I hope you'll join me again next time on Artifactually Speaking.